Hi and welcome back to my channel. My name is Marta and I am the chef and author of Sense and Edibility, which is a site where I teach you everything I know about cooking, baking, and cocktail making. And today's video is about baking ginger pear turnovers. These little doodads. This is episode 2 in my puff pastry series. In the very first video of this series, I taught you how to make puff pastry. And what I want to do is with each subsequent episode, I want to teach you how to use the puff pastry that you learned how to make. These ginger pear turnovers are on my website, senseandedibility.com. But I wanted to show you how I make them. But before we get to that, I would love it if you would subscribe to my channel and sign up for notifications so that you can be alerted every single time I post a new video. In the meantime, check out how I make my ginger pear turnover. This one wants me to eat it. Check out how I make my ginger pear turnovers. Okay, first things first is safety. Take a damp paper towel and lay it underneath your cutting board. This keeps your cutting board from shifting around as you're trying to cut, and you need to cut 3 large Bosc pears. Now, I've already cut up 2 of these, but I want to show you how to do it. You're going to cut it in half down its length, and you want to remove the seeds and this fibrous kind of thing that runs through the center of it. Use a melon baller if you have it because it gets the seeds and the core out fastest. If you don't have a melon baller, you can always use a teaspoon measuring spoon, but it's harder and sometimes things like that happen. Just gather that up and discard it, or you can compost it. Once you have your halves, you want to cut them into quarters and use your knife to remove the corner, which is that long fibrous stem that runs down the middle of the pear. You also want to remove that calyx that is at the bottom of the pear. You could do that by just kind of going in at an angle and taking out the pointed part of the pear quarter. Now, once you have the stem, calyx, and seeds removed, you're going to cut the quarters of the pear into 1/4 inch thick slabs, and then you're going to dice them into 1/4 inch cubes. You want your pears to be all uniform in size because you want them all to cook at the same time and soften at the same time. We're also going to do a technique a little bit later on. So if you have large chunks of pear and small chunks of pear, then everything is not going to come out the same. Try to be as uniform as possible is what I'm saying. Add these diced pears to the bowl with the rest of your diced pears and set this to the side. That side. This is a 1.5 inch. You could use 1 inch or 1.5 inches, a knob of fresh ginger that I'm cutting into 1/8 of an inch slabs, and then I'm julienning them into 1/8 of an inch strips. After I julienne them, I'm going to turn them and mince them. Mincing is just a very, very small dice. You don't want your ginger to be extremely large chunks because if you do, somebody's going to get a mouthful of fire because ginger is very spicy. Continue mincing your ginger in this way and add it to the bowl with the diced pears. Now, what you're going to do is a technique called macerating, and that's where you add sugar to fruits mainly, and you allow the sugar to extract the juices, the natural juices in the fruit. This usually takes about 20 minutes for thicker cut and firmer fruits like pears. You could go up to 30 minutes for these, but 20 minutes is great. Once your pears have macerated, you're going to see some liquid down in the bowl. The riper they are, the more liquid you're going to find. Add all but a cup of those macerated pears to a 4-quart saucepan. And over medium-high heat, you want to bring these pears up to a simmer. The heat from the stove is going to extract the liquid from the pears. And while you're waiting for that to happen, add ground cinnamon and kosher salt, cornstarch, apple cider vinegar, and cold water to a small mixing bowl, and use a whisk to whisk this slurry until it is nice and smooth and everything is combined. This is what we're going to use later after most of the liquids have been extracted from the pears in the pot to thicken that liquid. Set this to the side and continue to cook those pears over medium-high heat. Now, this shouldn't take too long. It should take about 3 minutes if you diced your pears properly. It could take upwards of 6 to 7 minutes for you to extract enough of the liquids and for the pears to get tender. But once they do, what you want to do is take that slurry that you created earlier, and you're going to give it another stir to remix it, and slowly, in a slow, steady stream, stir it into the center of the pears. You don't want to add it too fast because then it's going to clump up, and you want to stir constantly while you add it. Go ahead and add the vanilla extract to the mixture in the pot, and then take the hot pears and fold them into the reserved pears that you set aside earlier. Doing this gives your filling, your ginger pear filling in your turnovers some texture, because then you have softer pears mixed with firmer pears, and it just makes life a little bit more exciting. Go ahead and let that cool completely. You can do that overnight or just at room temperature. Now make your egg wash by adding water to a large egg and whisk it thoroughly until there are no clumps remaining. This is what you're going to use to seal and give some gloss to your turnovers. Set this to the side and grab a portion of puff pastry dough. If you haven't made my puff pastry dough, here's a link. Mash it up a bit so it's a little bit flexible and easier to roll. And then liberally flour your countertop. Add some flour to the top of your puff pastry portion and roll it out. You want a square that's about 16 by 16 inches. You can also do a rectangle. The goal here is to get 4-inch squares out of one portion of puff pastry. So do what you got to do to get there. I'm not a huge fan of making people measure stuff, but that's the goal, 4-inch squares. You want your puff pastry to be about 1/8 of an inch, no more than 1/4 of an inch thick, because you want it to bake all the way through. Use a pastry wheel to cut off the ragged edges. This also helps your puff pastry, your turnovers, rise properly. And then cut out those 4-inch squares using the pastry wheel. Use a pastry brush to brush your egg wash on just 2 sides or 2 edges of your squares. Those are going to be the edges that we press the unbrushed sides to seal them. Use a number 30 portion scoop, and usually this is about 1.5 ounces to 2 ounces, or about 1.5 tablespoons, to fill just the lower third of your squares. Fold over the unbrushed or unegg washed edges of the puff pastry square and press them down to seal them to the brushed edges of the puff pastry square. Continue doing this until all of your turnovers are turned over. Repeat this step with the second portion of puff pastry. Place your turnovers on your sheet pan and refrigerate it for 20 minutes. And then after 20 minutes, what you want to do is get some flour and dip a fork, the tines of a fork, into the flour and crimp the edges of the turnover. Sealing the turnovers was one way to keep them from exploding in the oven. Pinching them or crimping them with a fork is going to be kind of like added insurance to keep them from just like oozing everywhere. Now listen, they're still going to ooze, but that's just the nature of the beast. And I'm kind of not mad at it because it makes it really cute and rustic. Take a knife and poke across into the top of each turnover. That's just a venting system to keep, once again, your turnovers from exploding. And then brush the top of each turnover with a good amount of the egg wash. Once your turnovers are nice and glossy, sprinkle some turbinado sugar over it. This just gives it some added crunch and texture. This is not necessary, but it's good. And then bake your turnovers for 20 minutes to 25 minutes in a 400-degree oven, which is 204 degrees Celsius, till they look gorgeous and golden and bubbly and crispy like this. Now, while this pan is cooling, you want to bake the second pan of turnovers for the same amount of time. You're going to take the same steps to prepare it, and then after that, all you need is some coffee and an appetite, and you're ready to enjoy your ginger pear turnovers. Now, as always, the ultimate test of whether or not a turnover or a pastry is worth its weight in sugar is to check out its flakiness. I will do that for you because I love you and I like to sacrifice for you. It's flaky. It's flaky and it's good. Tested it twice. I'm gonna go get a paper towel to clean my face. And when I come back, I'm gonna answer some frequently asked questions I get about this ginger pear turnover recipe. I'll be back. This happens to be the biggest question I get with any of the recipes on my site that require puff pastry. You do not have to use homemade puff pastry for any of my recipes. I understand that life is crazy and you may not have the time to make your own puff pastry at home. But can I add a quick plug on why you should? I went to the grocery store yesterday to do my groceries for Thanksgiving because you know people be crazy around Thanksgiving time, so I do it early. But anyway, so I went to the grocery store and past the frozen aisle where the puff pastry was. $6.78 for one box of puff pastry. You can make puff pastry at home with flour, butter, salt, water, for a lot less. That's just my, that's my prompting you to, take time on a weekend or whenever your day off is and go ahead and make yourself some puff pastry. Because $6.78? No ma'am, no sir, not for me. But you don't have to use homemade puff pastry. You can use a box of puff pastry sheets. 2 usually come in one box. So 1 box is enough for this recipe for the ginger pear turnovers. So yeah, you must be balling if you got $6.78 to spend on a box of puff pastry. So lend me $2. You can replace the pear with I wouldn't use Granny Smith apples. Hold that. Use a semi-sweet gala apple for this recipe because there's not a lot of sugar in it. So you do still want it to be kind of sweet. And if you use a Granny Smith apple, it's going to be super tart. So use a gala apple or a Honeycrisp apple, cut it the same way, treat it the same way by macerating it, and cook it the same way. I would probably add about 10 more minutes of cooking at the front end because apples are firmer than pears are. You could also use quince, which is very similar to an apple. You can use an Asian pear. There was something else that I was thinking you can use, and I can't remember it. I hate that when that happens. I'll post it in the comments if I remember it. All of these things, the apple, the quince, the Asian pear, I highly suggest adding a little bit more ginger to it because they're very bland when compared to the floral sweetness of pears. So I would add a little bit, probably about a teaspoon, maybe half a teaspoon more of the minced ginger, or you can add not a tablespoon. No, Martha, no. You can add a teaspoon of ground cinnamon instead of half of a teaspoon. You can use Seckel pears, Forelli pears, and I think that's it. Yeah, because those are the ones that are similar in texture and flavor to Bosc pears. But Bosc pears are the easiest to find, so I don't think you'll have trouble finding them. But just in case you do, those are the other options that you can use in this recipe. You can omit the ginger completely and increase the cinnamon in this recipe to 1.5 teaspoons. You can increase the amount of minced ginger in this recipe to 2 tablespoons. Now, bear in mind that ginger is spicy when it's used in quantity. When you have a lot of ginger in a recipe, it becomes spicy instead of floral and tangy and astringent in a good way. So be mindful of that. I would rather, if you really like the flavor of ginger, I would rather you use the amount called for minced ginger and supplement it with half a teaspoon of ground ginger. That way you're not like choking on your turnover, because that's not cool. You're probably going to have about a half a cup to 3/4 of a cup of the ginger pear filling left over after you fill your 12 squares of puff pastry. That is not a bad thing because that filling is amazing when stirred into oatmeal, cream of wheat. You can stir it or top your yogurt in the morning with it to have a fall vibe. What else have I've eaten it just like straight from the bowl with a spoon for quality control purposes. So if you have some left over, don't be mad at me. Be like, well, she made me make this and now I don't know what to do with it. I just gave you stuff to do with it, so you're welcome. The best way to store these ginger pear turnovers is at room temperature in an airtight container. There's nothing in them that's gonna spoil or go bad that requires them to be refrigerated. I mean, you can refrigerate them if you want to, but when you refrigerate baked goods, you cause them to go stale faster. Store them at room temperature in a covered container for up to 3 days. If you want to warm them up, you can do it in the microwave, though it makes it soggy if you do that. If you have an air fryer, set your air fryer to about 400 degrees on the air fryer setting and heat them up for about 3 to 4 minutes in the air fryer and they'll come out nice and crisp. You can also do that in a 300 degree oven. I don't know what that is, Celsius. I'm sorry, can't remember. A 300 degree oven for about 5 to 6 minutes to make them nice and warm and toasty and crispy again. Yeah. You can freeze them before you bake them, or you can freeze them after you bake them and you allow them to cool. If you want to freeze them before you bake them, don't brush the egg wash over it. You fill them, seal them with a fork as you saw me do in the video, and put them on a sheet pan. Put that sheet pan in a freezer and allow the turnovers to freeze completely. So that usually takes about 4 hours. Once they're frozen completely, you could pick them up. They won't bend, they won't flop. You could pick them up and transfer them to a freezer storage bag and store them in the freezer for about 3 months. When you're ready to bake them, you don't even have to thaw them. Just put them in a preheated oven and add about 5 minutes to the baking time to account for them being frozen. But you can thaw them if you want to. If you don't want to add that extra baking time, pull them out the night before you plan to bake them, put them in the refrigerator, separate them, because what's going to happen is while they're in the refrigerator, they're going to start to thaw out and the puff pastry may become gummy and it'll stick to each other. So if they stick to each other, you're probably going to end up with holes in your turnovers, which is that just sucks. So separate them. You can even put them on the sheet pan, thaw them in the refrigerator covered with plastic wrap or foil, and then pull them out of the fridge, brush them with the egg wash, sprinkle the sugar on them, and bake them as instructed. The same thing would happen if you're baking from frozen. You would brush them with the egg wash, sprinkle the sugar, and bake them. Just remember to add that extra 5 minutes to account for the frozen. Now, if you want to freeze them after baking, allow them to cool completely, arrange them on a sheet pan, freeze them until solid, again about 4 hours, transfer them into a freezer storage bag, and freeze them for up to 2 months. The reason why I say to freeze them on sheet pans is because when you do that, you're not clumping them all together as if you would be doing if you just stuffed all of them into a freezer storage bag. If you do that, you can't just take one out. You can't just decide, oh, hey, it's Wednesday afternoon. I feel like eating a turnover. You can't go into the refrigerator or into the storage bag, grab it out, just one, and heat that up, right? You have to take the whole clump out. And then you're forced to eat the whole clump of turnovers. And then you blame me for weight gain. And I'm not taking the blame for that. So if you freeze them individually, you can pack them into the bag individually and take out one at a time. And then you satisfy your Wednesday afternoon craving without blaming me for your weight gain. So that's why you should do it. Same thing with the baked frozen ginger pear turnovers. Take them out of the freezer when you want to eat one. Heat them in the microwave, soggy. Heat them in the air fryer for the same amount of time, or in an oven for about 5 to 6 minutes, maybe up to 7 minutes. You can also just thaw them at room temperature. You don't need to thaw them in the fridge because they're already baked. Another filling that you can replace the pear with, replace them with berries. Same weight as called for in the recipe, just use berries. I personally think that the best spice to use with berries is cardamom. Cardamom goes perfectly with all types of berries. All the berries that exist, cardamom is it. But if you don't like cardamom, you can always replace it with cinnamon or with ginger. So that's another option for filling your turnovers. Okay, so I think I've answered all my frequently asked questions about this recipe. If I didn't, I'm sure you'll let me know in the comments below. If you make this recipe, please let me know how you liked it in the comments below. And don't forget to go to the website and actually comment on the recipe on my website. Google likes that. I like that because it makes me feel like I'm doing something. Like I'm not just talking to myself and the universe is like just not hearing me. Until next time, don't forget to subscribe to my channel. Give this video a thumbs up if you liked it. And don't forget to sign up for notifications so that every time I post a new video, you can be alerted. In the meantime, I hope to see you around. I'm gonna finish this turnover that I started and I'm gonna enjoy it. Thanks for watching. Bye. Yeah. Hi and welcome. I shouldn't do that. Ginger pear. I wanted to say peach. Now, the best way to store these ginger pear puff pastries, put the